Hey, good morning everyone. We are starting today with the brewing of our beer. So as you see, we will need two ingredients, which is a pan of hot water and grain. So beer is a grain-based beverage. This is indeed malted barley malt, which we already yesterday have, as you can see, crushed up, milled if you wish. However, a little bit of difference between, let's just say, what a brewer does and what a flour mill does. As you can see, what we want is basically the husks of the grain have been torn apart, and we want to keep them as complete as possible. Later on they will help in filtering our beer. But we have indeed torn this apart using a disc mill, and well, basically we will start our process by adding our grain to our water. It's time to start brewing our beer, which we will indeed start by depositing our grain. This is probably one of my favorite moments. The smell alone is, well, I would say if you like beer, try to brew at least one time in your life. You will experience this for yourself. But it gives off a lovely sweet bread smell, if I have to say it like that. So we will just try and mix up our grains. Now, just to explain some of the chemistry that's going on. So we deposited our malt into water of about 65 degrees centigrade, and we are trying to work with a certain enzyme inside, or activate a certain enzyme inside the grain, which is called amylase. So this amylase will first of all start extracting these sugars. So what we want to do is, again, the water has a certain temperature. We know that amylase is most active at about 62 to 63 degrees centigrade, which we should be having right now inside our kettle. And this will start extracting the sugars. Later on, we can work with another type of enzyme which will basically break up the sugars even further as they are now, which will make for either, or it's in that stage that we can determine whether we want to make a sweet, medium bodied or a dry beer. But we will get more into that as time progresses. So we are letting this sit here for 45 minutes at this temperature. Just check the temperature from time to time, and in 45 minutes we can basically up the temperature to around about 70 degrees. Now, we are indeed at our correct temperature of 65 degrees. I just wanted to add, what we will be brewing today is going to be a bock beer, so a very dark amber light brown ale with a few notes of caramel, pretty fruity as well. But what we want to be doing normally is checking the pH of our water. Normally an ideal pH should be around 5.7. That means that indeed our enzymes can do their work ideally. Our yeast will be able to work better later on. Unfortunately, I had to find out this morning that my pH meter broke, but no worries. From experience, I know that I do have to add a few drops of acid, in this case lactol or some lactic acid. And great tip, if you don't have a dropper and you want to add just a few drops, voila, just a bit more, but you add a little bit into the cap, and the screws in the screw cap actually allow you to dosage this very precisely. So we will let this sit for about 45 minutes, then we can up the temperature, and we can continue brewing our beer. We are at the end of our mash now, so we have mashed in. We are now at about 75 degrees centigrade, which is indeed the temperature we want to be at, to start indeed filtering our liquid. So we will indeed be separating our solids from our liquids. For this we will first of all be using an equipment like this. It's a siphon filter, which we will place at the bottom of our kettle. What we will basically be doing, we will be siphoning our liquids through our siphon filter. As soon as they come out clear in the bucket, we can start. And we will also be using more water to basically wash out or rinse out more of the sugars out of our grains. Now, one thing I just wanted to stress while we're at this stage, it is to talk about, well, cleanliness, sanitizing, and everything. Now, there's a big, or you do have to be at every step of the way clean. Regarding indeed your kettle, regarding your equipment, everything has to be clean. Now, I do personally keep a very simple logic to things. Some people go about, you have to sterilize, sanitize until your heart's content. But there's a very simple process. Boiling, what we will be doing later, will basically sterilize the liquid. So anything before boiling, you want to be clean. You want to clean the heck out of it. You want a clean kettle. You want clean water kettles, you want clean buckets, you want everything to be clean as you can. Anything that happens or that comes into contact with indeed chilling or cooled wort, that will have to be sanitized. So just to explain a bit of my thought process, but we are going to start filtering now, and afterwards we will be boiling our wort. Nothing too difficult in this stage. I will just start siphoning our liquid. And the first couple of drops, as you see, do still contain some grain. No problem. We just toss those back into the pot. And we can basically run them through. We'll rinse this one out because there's still some grains. We can run this through. And the trick here is to be as slow as you possibly can. So we want a good flow, but the longer it takes for the sugars to rinse out, the more sugars will come out. So keep this running as frequent or keep your faucet settled to such a fact that it is indeed running frequent but slow. And as soon as we have our requisite volume of liquid, we can start working towards cooking. I just want to explain one little thing, that while we are rinsing, what we will be doing is checking the density of our liquid. So checking how much sugar is actually in there. Now for this we use a very simple tool, namely what I use is a refractometer. You can try and use a densimeter for this job, but it's a very big pain in the neck, so if you can upgrade to this, not that expensive. But we basically take one drop of our liquid, put it in here, and basically through refraction, or how the light pierces through, we can get a measurement of how much sugars we are actually extracting at this moment. And we do also know at what point we should stop rinsing our liquid. We are nearly boiling, or we are coming to the situation where we are nearly boiling our beer. So at this point in time, it's time to measure out our hops. Now hops, well, they basically act as the preservant of our beer. So they provide indeed bitterness, and those bitter elements preserve our beer. Now again, here you can play along with what you want to add. Do you want strong hops, mild hops, lot of hops, little hoppiness, depending on your beer. Again, we want something that's pretty mild. So I've chosen to add two types of hop. One being Styrian Goldings, which is a very typical Pilsen hop. And, oh, there we go. We set this to 0 again. This should be about right. And indeed, what we will be adding also is hops in these are pallets, and we will be adding some flowers as well. This is actually Saaz, another very traditional Pilsen hop, mild in flavor. So just to give you a look, there we go, at what they've actually double packed this stuff, but what the actual hop flowers look like. So the pallets are basically indeed a form of dried concentrate, and these are indeed, damn it, are dried hop flowers. So we want about 20 grams of these to go into our mixture, and it should again provide for a good but not too heavy hoppiness. So this is what we want to avoid, is the beer getting too hoppy. It's not that kind of beer, but we will be adding this as we are boiling our beer, and afterwards, of course, after boiling, we will need to cool. We are now entering the final phase of production of our beer. So our beer has boiled. It has been cooking for about a good 1.5 hours, and what we want to achieve now is basically to cool it and put it into our fermenting tank, in this case a fermenting bucket. Now what we use for that, it's a piece of equipment called a wort chiller. This is nothing more than a set of opposing metal plates that go in opposite directions, and basic principle is, on one side we are putting in cool water that will come out warm on the other side, and we do the same thing on the opposing side with the warm liquid that will turn out cool. We will cool this beer, after which, as I said, it should be ready for fermenting. Unfortunately, I don't have enough active yeast yet, but that will be for tomorrow morning. So as soon as we can, we will start fermenting this, and we can continue in the process of our beer. After a good day's work, well, this is our basic result, about 22 liters of wort, to which at this very moment we will be adding the last ingredient, namely our yeast. Now in this case, this is actually a yeast extract that I have indeed started myself. There we go. I do indeed keep my own yeast cultures, but that we started growing a few days ago for this purpose. Now we will cover this up. This can go into a hot or into a warm environment for a few days, where it will be allowed to ferment, at which point we will be talking about proper beer.